all know the benefits of eating healthy, and I think we all try to do it, and we probably think we're doing it, but with so many different diets and detoxes and supplements and alternatives that are out there on the market, it can be really confusing to know what we really should and shouldn't be eating. And that's why I'm here today in Brixton Market with registered dietitian Tai Ibitoye. Hi Tai, how are you doing?
Good,
so you're going to shed some light for us on this massive topic of nutrition. First of all, can you tell us what the 5 food groups are?
Yes, of course. So the main 5 food groups are fruits and vegetables, starchy carbohydrates, protein, dairy, oils and fats.
Okay, so then when we say a balanced diet, you hear that term all the time.
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about, getting the right balance of those various different food groups?
Yes, it's all about moderation, getting the balance right. On a typical plate, we would say that when you have your plate, half of the plate should be vegetables where possible, quarter of it should be your starchy carbohydrates, and the other quarter should be your protein.
Okay, I think that's quite nice to visualise,
Yes.
isn't it? Thinking about carbs then, I think people sometimes get confused about potatoes because, of course, potatoes are a type of vegetable, but in terms of our diet, they actually count as a carbohydrate, don't they, rather than a fruit and veg?
They do. So
Why is that?
potatoes don't contribute towards your fibre a day. They're actually a starchy carbohydrate.
Okay. So then, a bit more about carbs. So carbs like potatoes,
Yes.
rice,
Yes.
pasta, bread, baked goods. These things often get a bit of a bad reputation.
Yes, they do.
You know, we often hear that we shouldn't be having them, we shouldn't be having too much, they might make us gain weight. What's the truth in that?
We know that with carbohydrates, it's often vilified, it's often demonized a lot in society, but actually carbohydrates are very, very important for us. We all need to add carbohydrates in our diet. And actually, you said something about it being fattening. That's what a lot of people do think. But gram per gram is actually not fattening compared to fats, which is also another type of macronutrient. And actually, it's not about what we eat, but how we're actually consuming these carbohydrates. So of course, if we're adding oil, butter, sugar, of course it's going to increase the calorie content. But generally speaking, carbohydrates are actually important for us, and they are actually really good for us to eat.
Next thing I wanted to ask you about is dairy and protein. And in particular, I wanted to ask about dairy alternatives. You know, a lot of people are turning towards a plant-based way of living for various different reasons. But I also think a lot of people assume that if we use milk, for example, I think a lot of people make the assumption that plant milks are more healthy. Is that true?
We know that with some plant-based alternatives, they can be quite high in sugar and also have a higher calorie content. However, for those who cannot tolerate dairy products for some particular reason, maybe due to health reasons, or maybe they're on a plant-based diet, they need to ensure that it's fortified with essential vitamins and minerals that you'll typically find in dairy products. For people who want to have a plant-based milk alternative, they need to ensure it's fortified with calcium and also fortified with iodine too.
And no added sugar.
And no added sugar, of course. Yes.
Okay, what about protein supplements? Is there any benefit to taking protein supplements?
Actually, we're consuming way too many protein than actually needed, which isn't really a bad thing, but where the protein comes from is super important. So you mentioned meat. So of course, consuming too much fatty meats, which of course is a great source of protein, may not be beneficial for us. So fatty meats tend to have high saturated fat content, so we need to reduce our intake of that. And where possible, go for healthier alternatives of protein, like chicken, obviously without the skin, because that's what the fat is, fish, and also up for plant-based proteins like beans, pulses, nuts and seeds.
What about vitamin supplements? Are they needed or not really?
So there is a place for vitamin supplements. There are subpopulation groups who will benefit from vitamin supplements, but as a whole, we can meet all of our vitamin recommendations by just consuming a healthy, balanced diet.
The final thing I want to ask you about is salt. So the recommendations are that we shouldn't have anything more than 6 grams a day, which is what, a heaped teaspoon?
Yes,
roughly?
it is.
But apparently on average, people have 8.4 grams a day. So how can we reduce our salt intake?
Wow, yes, I mean, even the stats, a lot of us are consuming way too much salt in our diets, and we can all benefit from reducing our salt intake. And there are many ways that we can do so. So for example, when we are cooking, making sure that we're not adding salt. Some people think that just because you don't add salt, it's going to make the food a bit bland, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can add fresh herbs or spices like paprika, ginger, garlic, and other ways is to eat less foods that contain salt. So for example, certain processed meats tend to be high in salt, like bacon, sausages, and this isn't to say you should avoid it totally, but of course just reduce your portion sizes and reduce your intake too.
So Tai, what would your sort of top tips be, or general advice for people who are trying to get a better balance of all the food groups?
Oh, so my first tip would be include foods that you actually enjoy eating, because a lot of the times people think in order to have a healthy, balanced diet, you just need to eat salad, and of course that's totally boring. So having foods that you enjoy in your diet, but then also having foods that provide you with nourishment. So getting the nutrients that your body needs. And a way to do that is making sure that you're including plenty of vegetables and fruits in your diet, going for starchy carbohydrates where possible, but in particular the whole grain versions. Making sure that you're having healthy proteins in your diet, and also dairy or dairy alternatives, and just a small amount of fat or oil, but going for the unsaturated versions where possible.
Okay, that's really helpful. And eating the rainbow, I love that, eat the rainbow.
Eat the rainbow,
foods have lots of benefits.
Exactly, it does.
Thank you, Tai. That was really helpful advice, and we did cover a lot of ground there. I think the thing it's reminded me is that in this confusing world of nutrition, sometimes it's important to just bring it back to basics and think about getting the food groups right. So I really hope that that's inspired you with some new ideas to tackle your diet.